Elena had my face in front of her. Not exactly. Mine had a scar in the eyebrow from a bike wreck when I was 12. I breathed too fast when I was afraid. Mine stood 6 feet away with one hand half raised, every muscle locked so hard it hurt. The other one stood close enough for her to touch. It wore my shape like a wet coat. Same work jacket, same badge clipped crooked at the chest, same mouth. But the smile was too broad. The corners dragged farther back than skin should have allowed, as if whoever made it had learned what a smile was from a bad description. "Elena," it said in my voice, gentle as a friend trying not to startle her. "It's me." She looked between us, and I saw the exact instant terror failed her. Not because she was stupid, because she was tired, frozen, and the plant had gotten better at us all night. I had a rule for this. I knew I did. Do not approach duplicates. Do not engage. If a copy reaches for someone else, remain still. Elena's fingers lifted. The false me offered its hand. The floor beneath the processing line gave a long, pleased shudder. Then she touched it, and the thing wearing my face smiled wider. It started 3 nights before that. There were 4 of us hired for the same overnight shift, and even then I knew that wasn't normal. The listing had been up for less than a day. Seasonal intake assistant, hazard pay, transportation stipend, meals included. No interview beyond a 10-minute phone call and a request that I bring steel-toed boots and clothes I didn't mind ruining. The money was better than anything else on the coast, which should have been a warning enough. But I had reached the part of my life where warning signs mostly looked like opportunities. I had come back to Greywash after 7 years away because the city had finally stopped pretending it had room for a man with a wrecked employment history, a suspended license, and just enough debt to make honest work feel theoretical. My mother had died the previous winter. My brother Caleb had drowned 15 years earlier off the same stretch of coast, and I still dreamed of standing on wet sand listening to him call for me while I decided for 1 second too long that I had probably imagined it. So I took the night job. The plant sat at the end of an access road that cut through a salt marsh and dead grass, all of it silver under the floodlights. The building itself looked less built than anchored. Half of it rose from pilings sunk directly into the black water, with corrugated walls streaked by rust and salt. The other half leaned inland against a concrete loading yard striped in old fish scales and diesel sheen. Above the main entrance, a sign read, "Greywash Coastal Processing" in faded blue letters, though several bulbs were out, leaving whole sections dark. There was a smell to the place that clothes carried home with them. Brine, bleach, old blood, and something sweet underneath. Not rotten exactly, but overripe. A smell that felt patient. I parked beside 2 other cars and a dented motorcycle. Tariq was already there, leaning against the bike in a clean hoodie and smoking like this was the first interesting thing that had happened to him all week. He was maybe 28, athletic, too good-looking for a job like that, yet with the kind of easy grin that made you trust him even while he was making fun of you. "You here for the glamorous maritime career path too?" he asked when I got out. "That obvious?" He looked me over. "You've got the face of a guy who clicked apply now at 2 in the morning. That makes 2 of us." "3," said a woman's voice. She stood a few yards away under the security lamp, one hand on the strap of a duffel bag. "Elena." She said her name later, but she looked like an Elena from the start. Mid-30s, slim dark hair tied back too tightly, eyes that seemed to catalog exits before people. She didn't smile. Not cold exactly, just careful. The 4th arrived last, not from the parking lot but from the side of the building, as if he had been walking the perimeter before coming in. Hargrove was in his 50s, broad-shouldered once. He now softened around the middle in the way of men who had spent decades doing hard labor and then paid for it all at once. He had a rain jacket zipped to his throat and an expression like he'd misplaced something important in the ocean and had spent years pretending not to look for it. When he saw the rest of us grouped outside the employee entrance, he stopped. "They hired 4?" he asked. "Guess we're the lucky class," Tariq said. Hargrove's mouth tightened. "Yeah." He didn't offer his first name, didn't shake hands, just pushed through the metal door when the buzzer clicked and left the rest of us to follow. Inside, the plant was brighter than I expected and somehow less reassuring for it. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Water ran in shallow troughs cut into the concrete floor. Somewhere deeper in the building, the machinery thudded with patient industrial rhythm. We passed a glassed-in office, a locker room, and a wall-mounted evacuation map with 4 zones marked in color. Dock intake, processing line, cold storage, administrative. I noticed there was a blank gray section at the bottom of the map where the building's footprint extended out over the water. "Printing error?" Tariq asked. The night supervisor, a woman named Mrs. Vale, didn't even glance at it. She was narrow, gray-haired, and so dry in manner that she seemed impossible in a place this wet. Her rubber apron was spotless. A lanyard holding a ring of keys hung at her hip, but none of them jingled when she moved. "Restricted access below service grade," she said. "You won't need it." Below service grade sounded like a phrase she had practiced until it stopped meaning anything. She gave us badges one by one and sent us through onboarding with brisk, almost bored efficiency. No orientation video, no HR paperwork beyond signatures, no safety demonstration besides a glance toward the eye wash station. Each of us was taken separately into the office for less than a minute and handed a folded sheet of paper. When it was my turn, Mrs. Vale closed the office door behind me and slid the paper across the desk without sitting down. "Read it now," she said. The paper had my name printed at the top in block letters. Mason Reed. Beneath that were 3 rules. Rule 1. Never look directly into the water under dock intake after midnight. Rule 2. If you hear your name called from the processing line, verify the source visually. Rule 3. Do not enter cold storage alone. I read them twice, waiting for the punchline, and there wasn't one. "Is this some kind of initiation thing?" I asked. Mrs. Vale's face didn't move. "It is for your safety." "From what?" "You'll find that broad questions produce poor outcomes here." I looked back at the paper. The font was ordinary office print, but there were water stains along the bottom edge, as if the page had dried after being partially submerged. "Are these real rules?" "They are your rules." The emphasis made me glance up. "My rules?" Mrs. Vale opened the office door. "Keep them on you at all times. If they become illegible, report it immediately." That was all. Back in the hall, Tariq was smirking at his own sheet. Elena had already folded hers into a neat square and tucked it into her sleeve. Hargrove didn't look at us at all. We were issued gloves, aprons, and radio earpieces that only received. And we could hear instructions from the supervisors, but we weren't given transmit capability. Another small thing that didn't feel right. Tariq raised his page. "What's everybody get, secret treasure maps?" "Put that away," Hargrove said. Tariq laughed. "Relax." Hargrove turned then, and something in his face shut the sound down for half a second. "I'm serious. Don't compare until you have to." "Why?" Elena asked. He hesitated. It wasn't reluctance. It was a calculation, like he was deciding how much truth people could survive at once. "Because this place likes group decisions," he said. Mrs. Vale walked us to the edge of the processing floor and began assigning stations as if nothing odd had been said at all. The line was a world of metal, hoses, drains, belts, and overhead hooks. Beyond it, through reinforced glass doors fogged with cold, and I could see the entrance to storage. Past the far wall, beyond a rolling gate, lay the dock intake, where the boats would come in on the tide. We started with shared confidence because that was the last easy thing available to us. There were 4 of us. We had rules even if they were weird ones. Hargrove had been there before. The plant was a plant. A job was a job. Night work made everything feel stranger than it was. That was what I told myself when the line first started moving without anyone touching the controls. That was what I told myself when the water under the floor made a sound like someone clearing their throat. That was what I told myself because the alternative had already begun. The first hour felt almost normal, which I later understood was part of the design, and the dock intake crew brought in crates from the trawlers and set them on wet pallets that rolled toward the line. Hoses hissed, conveyor belts clattered. The overhead speakers occasionally crackled with Mrs. Vale's voice, assigning tasks by badge number instead of name. There was enough motion and noise to make any odd detail seem incidental. That mattered. If the place had opened with screaming or shadows climbing the walls, we would have run. The plant knew better than that. It gave us the kind of discomfort a working person was used to dismissing. Flickering lights, vague instructions, machinery with personalities, old-timers who didn't talk enough, and supervisors who talked too little. Every place with desperate staffing had those. That was the camouflage. Tariq worked nearest the loading gate, he moving bins from intake to the processing tables with a speed that made it obvious he had done warehouse jobs before. He treated the whole shift like an elaborate prank somebody would eventually admit to. Every time Mrs. Vale's voice came over the speaker, he saluted the ceiling. Every time a conveyor jammed, he offered a running commentary like he was hosting a tour. "Here we have the majestic Alaskan cod," he announced at one point, hefting a silver fish into a trough. Known for its migratory patterns, economic value, and complete lack of enthusiasm. Elena worked with controlled efficiency, trimming labels, checking weights, and wiping down surfaces before she was asked. She didn't waste motion. She also didn't waste words. When Tariq joked with her, she answered just enough to prevent offense, no more. E. Hargrove floated between stations with the stiff resignation of someone returning to an injury. He knew where everything was without looking. He checked seals, doors, and drainage grates. Twice, I caught him glancing not at the floor exactly, but through it, toward whatever lay beneath the catwalks and concrete. As for me, I tried to settle into the rhythm. I stacked crates, logged intake numbers, and told myself my pulse was elevated because the place was cold and loud and new. At 11:47, I heard my name. "Mason." It came from the processing line to my left, low enough that I almost missed it under the motor noise. Rule 2 came back to me at once. If you hear your name called from the processing line, verify the source visually. I turned, nobody there but the belt, a row of fish sliding past under white light, Ede and Alina 3 stations down with her back to me. She didn't look up. Nobody else seemed to have heard it. I stared for maybe 3 seconds, then felt stupid. Exhaustion, acoustics, someone saying basin or station or anything else that could wear my name for a second in all that noise. Still, I kept my eyes on the line until Tariq passed behind me and nudged my shoulder with a bin. "You okay?" "Thought someone called me." He grinned. "Already hearing the sea sing? We haven't even hit midnight." I almost mentioned the rule and then remembered Hargrove's warning. At 12:10, we got our first break. The 4 of us ended up in the break room because, of course, we did. A fluorescent box with a vending machine, a coffee urn that looked older than me, and a window that should have faced the yard but showed only darkness. And not night outside. Just darkness, smooth and depthless, as if the glass opened onto a room with the lights off. We sat around a dented table with paper cups and the false camaraderie of people enduring the same bad decision. Tariq broke first. All right, he said, unfolding his paper with theatrical solemnity. I need to know if we've all joined the same cult or different cults. Hargrove, who had been standing by the sink, said, Don't. Tariq ignored him. My first rule says I'm supposed to check the water for movement actively. Like I've got water inspection duties now. Second says never respond to voices inside the building. Third says cold storage is safe if something follows me. I stared at him. That's not what mine says. Elena looked up sharply. Yours are different? Completely, Tariq said, delighted. Okay, and now we're having fun. I shouldn't have compared, I know that now. But the second the possibility existed that the instructions were not just strange but inconsistent, none of us were going to leave it alone. I told them mine. No looking into the water after midnight. Verify voices from the line visually. Don't enter cold storage alone. Elena took her time before unfolding her own sheet. When she did, I saw at once that hers wasn't typed the way ours were. The paper had been written on by hand in dark blue ink, narrow letters pressed so hard they had dented the page. Rule 1, the fish are not always dead. Rule 2, if one blinks, stop breathing. Rule 3, the lower deck is where they sort mistakes. Tariq barked a laugh and then stopped when none of us joined him. Who wrote that? He asked. Elena's face had gone flatter than before. No idea. You got the Haunted Limited Edition, he said. She didn't smile. The handwriting matches the note that told me to apply for this job. That quieted the room. I looked at her. You were recruited by note? It came to my apartment, no stamp, just my name and the listing, same handwriting. She folded the page again. I needed money. There it was again. The answer everybody used when they didn't want to give the real one. Hargrove still hadn't shown us his sheet. He stood with both hands braced on the sink, staring at the floor tile between his boots. What about yours? Tariq asked. No. Come on, man. Hargrove turned. You all done proving my point? What point? I said. That they don't want us agreeing. Tariq leaned back in his chair. Who's they? Hargrove's laugh had no humor in it. You think management's the worst thing here? Nobody answered. He came to the table, then pulled out a chair and sat as it cost him something. Up close I could see the broken veins around his nose, the old scar tucked under his chin, the permanent salt-burn texture of skin exposed to wind and brine for too many years. I worked here once, he said. 3 winters. Left. Thought that was the end of it. Then my wife got sick, bills stacked up, and suddenly somebody from Greywash Processing remembered I existed. Mrs. Vale's voice crackled faintly through the wall speaker in the corridor, though no words came through. Hargrove lowered his voice. You want my advice? Fine. Don't follow anybody else's rules. Don't assume a thing that helps one of you helps all of you. And if the building gives you a choice between staying together and being correct, pick correct. Elena said, You came back. Why? He held her gaze for a second too long. Because I wasn't sure I had ever really left. The brake horn buzzed before anyone could ask what that meant. We stood, gathered our gloves, and filed back toward the processing floor in a silence different from the one we'd entered with. Not hostile yet. Just thinner. Each of us now occupied a slightly separate reality, and we knew it. The line had accelerated while we were gone. No one had touched the controls. As we stepped back out under the fluorescent lights, a fish slid past on the conveyor with one lidless eye turned toward the catwalk. It winked. I flinched so hard my coffee sloshed over my hand. When I looked again, it was just a fish. He split at the belly and pale under the lights, moving with the others toward the cutters. Elena had stopped dead beside me. Her lips parted, then sealed. For 3 full seconds she did not breathe. Then very quietly she exhaled. Tariq noticed and frowned. What? Nothing, she said. But that was the first moment I truly understood what the conflicting rules meant. The plant was not disorganized. It was personalized. And something in it had already started paying attention to which version of danger each of us would believe. It was Tariq who kept us functioning as a group after the break, and I hated him a little for how effective he was at it. Not because he was wrong, at least not yet. Because he was the kind of person who could make recklessness sound like morale. Every time tension thickened, he cracked a joke. Every time Alina withdrew into silence, either I lingered too long over one of the rules in my head, or he dragged us back into conversation by force of personality alone. You know what this is? He said as we hosed down a sorting table around 12:30. Corporate gamification. They give everybody different, not weird memos to see who follows instructions under pressure. We're one clipboard away from being a management seminar. Management seminars don't involve handwritten warnings about breathing, Alina said. Depends on the industry. Hargrove was resetting a pallet jack nearby. Shut up and work. Tariq grinned at me over the spray of the hose. See, this is how they get you. They create one creepy old guy and suddenly everybody writes their own ghost story. I wanted to agree with him. God, I wanted to. And the entire world becomes easier when there is one loud, mocking voice willing to call fear by a smaller name. So when the call came over the ceiling speaker for 2 workers to assist at dock intake, I was already primed to keep the peace. The loading gate rolled up with a metallic groan. Cold air came in wet and salty. Outside, the dock stretched under floodlights toward the dark outline of a trawler bumping gently against rubber buffers. Men in slickers moved crates from the boat to the platform, faces obscured by hoods and rain. I never got a clear look at any of them. Later, I would try to remember whether I had ever seen their mouths. Tariq and I were sent to receive the load. Hargrove stayed inside. Alina came with us even though nobody had asked her to. She said she wanted to see the intake pattern, and that sounded practical enough to let pass. Under the dock, ocean water shifted black between the pylons. Not rough, not calm either, just deliberate, as if the tide were thinking about something. I remembered my first rule immediately and stayed away from the railing. Tariq noticed. What, water's off limits for you too? Actually, yeah. He snorted. Mine says the opposite. We moved crates in silence for a few minutes. Their contents were heavier than they should have been for the species labels stamped on the sides. A bin marked mackerel felt like it was full of wet sandbags. One marked squid sloshed with thick resistance, and when I glanced inside, I saw only silver bodies packed in shaved ice. The boat crew never spoke. They handed over the crates and went back for more. At 12:58, Tariq set down the end of a pallet and wiped rain off his forehead with the back of his glove. There, he said, after midnight, my rule. He walked toward the railing. I caught his sleeve. Maybe don't. He looked genuinely puzzled. Why not? Because mine says never look directly into the water after midnight. So don't, I will. That's not how any of this works. He spread his hands. Then how does it work, Mason? We all stand around with our eyes closed until dawn? Alina had gone very still. Tariq, what? Don't ask questions out loud. That landed badly, his jaw set. Beneath the joking, Tariq had pride like anybody else, and we had all spent the last hour letting Hargrove's dread set the terms. It says always check the water for movement, he said. Always, not sometimes. Not only if the spooky committee agrees. He stepped to the rail and leaned over. Nothing happened. He looked back at me with a grin sharp enough to annoy. See? That grin did it. If he had looked scared, I might have held my ground. Instead, I felt the old ugly pressure of not wanting to be the weak link in a room full of strangers. The pressure that had made me dumb in bars, in cars, in friendships, in nearly every bad choice of my 20s. Fear is one thing. Fear observed is another. So I went to the railing and looked down. At first all I saw was water fill me with reflected light. Then the angle was resolved. There were shapes down there, long, pale, and moving in parallel beneath the surface, too evenly spaced to be schools of fish, too smooth to be driftwood. They made no ripples. They passed under the dock beams with slow, unquestioning purpose, curving just enough that I understood they were aware of the structure above them. One of the shapes stopped. I don't know how something underwater can convey attention, but it did. It halted and turned upward as cleanly as a face lifted toward a window. The water bulged around a suggestion of shoulders, of a head, of features not yet finished. The cold that hit me wasn't environmental. It was interior. My lungs stalled halfway through a breath. My hands locked on the rail. Somewhere near me, Tariq said something that arrived warped and far away as if he were speaking through a pipe. The shape rose, not fast. That was the worst part. Fast would have been an attack. This was recognition. I had the insane certainty that it was noticing me noticing it, and that some threshold had been crossed simply by the mutuality of that act. Then Alina's hand clamped around my forearm hard enough to bruise, and she yanked me backward with a strength I did not expect from her slight frame. "Don't look twice," she hissed. I stumbled, hit the wet dock on one knee, and dragged in air so sharply it hurt. My chest burned. My vision speckled white for a second. When I looked up, Alina was not looking at the water. She was looking at me. Tariq, for once, had nothing funny ready. He stood at the rail, too still, mouth half open. "What the hell was that?" I said. "No idea," he said, but he was whispering now. Hargrove's voice came from the loading gate behind us. "Get back inside, now." He must have crossed out without me hearing him. He grabbed the nearest crate jack and shoved it toward the gate with enough force to make the wheels squeal. "Move!" Something hit the underside of the dock, not a crash. More like a body turning over in sleep. The platform gave one deep wooden thump beneath our boots, then another farther down. Then a scraping noise along the pilings that made all the hair on my arms stand up under the waterproof sleeves. We moved. Back through the loading gate, under the hot white lights into the processing floor where the noise of the machinery should have made everything ordinary again. It didn't. My chest still felt tight, as if cold fingers remained wrapped around the ribs from inside. Tariq kept glancing over his shoulder at the dock doors. Elena washed her hands for no reason I could see, long past the point of cleanliness. Hargrove rounded on us once the gate slammed shut. "I told you," he said to nobody and everybody, "I told you not to cross." "You told us not to follow each other," Tariq shot back, but the bravado had thinned. "My sheet told me to check the water." "And he told him not to, which should have told you the water doesn't show everyone the same thing." I leaned on the stainless table because my knees didn't entirely trust me. It looked up. Hargrove's expression changed in a way I couldn't read. No surprise, not disbelief. Recognition maybe, but the kind that didn't comfort. "What did it look like?" he asked. I opened my mouth and realized I couldn't describe it without sounding insane. It had looked human only in the way a reflection looks human before you notice it's doing the wrong things. "Like it was trying," I said finally. No one answered. The line behind us clattered on. Fish slid under the cutters. The floor drains took pink water away in quiet spirals. Then from the far end of the processing line, over the motors and the spray and the metallic chatter, I heard my name again. "Mason," clear as a hand on my shoulder. Rule 2 said to verify the source visually. I looked. At the very end of the line beyond the cutter station, something moved behind a hanging plastic strip curtain where no one should have been standing. I saw only the outline of a person, and the shape lifted one arm as though waving me closer. That was when I understood the real consequence of almost dying together. It wasn't just that Tariq's rule had nearly killed me. It was that whatever lived in the plant now knew I could be talked into looking. After the dock, we stopped pretending the weirdness was incidental. That didn't make us smarter. It just made the rooms smaller. Nobody proposed splitting up immediately because fear still pushed us toward each other in the dumb mammal way. A group means witnesses. A group means someone else might confirm what you saw. A group means the thing in the water has more people to choose from. Those are not all the same kind of comfort, but at 1 in the morning they can feel close enough. We stayed in pairs when we could. We drifted into visual range when station assignments separated us. Every time a speaker crackled or a belt shifted speed on its own, somebody's head turned to make sure the others were still there. That was when the plant adapted. The processing line slowed to a crawl without any corresponding drop in intake. Then impossibly, and it continued moving with no crates coming in at all. Fish began appearing on the conveyor that I knew had not been unloaded from the boats because I had logged every pallet after midnight. They were unfamiliar species, too pale, too long, with fins that lay against their bodies like folded hands. Their mouths opened and closed in lazy rhythm, though the gills did not move. Elena saw the first twitch before the rest of us. She was standing across from me at the rinse station, sleeves wet to the elbows, when her gaze snapped downward. "Back," she said. I stepped away automatically. A fish on the belt jerked once, not the residual nerve flick of dead muscle, but an intentional movement, a whole body correction. Its tail tapped the stainless edge. Then its nearest eye rolled toward us. The lid drew down, blinked. Elena's hand shot out and clamped over my mouth and nose with startling force. I understood her rule a fraction too late and stopped breathing. Tariq, 2 stations over, swore and inhaled sharply to ask what she was doing. Hargrove slammed the emergency stop before the words left his mouth, and the belt lurched to a halt. The room seemed to constrict around the silence. 1 second, 2, 3. The fish's eye remained open, glassy, blank. Elena released me first, then backed away as if from a stove. Tariq bent double, coughing. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "You were about to breathe at it," Elena said. "At it?" Hargrove did not restart the line right away. He stood with one hand on the emergency stop, head tilted, listening downward again. I started noticing that whenever something happened above us, and he checked below first. "Why do you keep looking at the floor?" I asked him. His eyes flicked up. "Because this isn't where it starts." "The lower deck," Elena said. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The weirdest part was how quickly these moments began to stack without ever becoming normal. Each new violation pushed the old ones backward in our minds, making room for fresh terror while never letting the earlier kind settle into understanding. That's how people get trapped in bad systems. Nothing remains shocking long enough to be processed before the next thing demands adaptation. Around 1:30, Tariq started slipping. At first, it was subtle. He would glance toward a corridor when nobody had spoken. Smiley space. Answer questions that hadn't been asked. "You hear that?" he said once while stripping gloves at the sink. "You'd hear what?" I asked. "My mom used to whistle like that when she was pissed." No one was whistling. Later, as we crossed the catwalk between the line and the storage doors, he laughed under his breath. "What?" Elena asked. He shook his head. "Nothing. Somebody just said my jacket looks stupid." Hargrove stopped walking. "Who?" Tariq's grin faltered. "Nobody." But a few minutes after that, I watched him turn his head toward the machinery and say distinctly, "Yeah, all right," to no one at all. "Your rule says never respond to voices," I said. He shrugged. "Maybe those aren't voices. That's not funny anymore." He looked at me then, and there was a fraction of a second where I thought I saw embarrassment, real human embarrassment at being caught frightened. It almost softened me. Then he said, "I didn't ask you." We all had private thresholds, I realized, places where the collective fear became less important than the humiliation of seeming vulnerable inside it. Groups don't fail only because horror breaks them. Sometimes they fail because each person does not want to be the first one to admit how far gone things are. My own rules changed at 1:47, or maybe they revealed more of themselves. I had taken the sheet from my pocket to dry it after the dock incident had soaked one corner. Under the warmer air near the boiler vent, faint gray lines began to emerge beneath the original 3. Not ink exactly. More like text returning as the paper dried. Rule 4. If you see someone where they should not be, lower your eyes first. Rule 5. After 2 a.m., familiar voices may be incomplete. Rule 6. Do not approach duplicates, even if they seem injured. I read those lines twice, then folded the page before anybody else could see. Not because I was hoarding information. Because the page had answered a question I hadn't asked, and that felt intimate in the worst possible way. When I looked up, Tariq was watching me. "What got added?" he said. "Nothing. Your face says otherwise." "Maybe my face doesn't like this place." He smiled again, but it sat wrong on him now. Too delayed, like he had waited to see if smiling was what the moment required. The overhead speakers crackled. Mrs. Vale's voice came through soft and flat. "Badge 14, report to cold storage vestibule." Nobody moved. "Badge 14, she repeated. Elena checked her badge. "That's me." "No," Hargrove said immediately. She looked up. "My rule says don't enter cold storage alone, and it doesn't say don't go, which means it wants you escorted." He glanced at us, and fine, all of us. Tariq laughed, though there was no amusement in it. I thought we weren't following each other. "We're not," Hargrove said. "We're observing." That distinction meant nothing and everything. We approached the cold storage doors together. Frost rimed the seals, though the plant itself was merely cold, not freezing. Through the narrow wired glass panes, I could make out stacked pallets, steel shelves, white vapor drifting low across the floor. Elena reached for the handle and stopped. From somewhere behind us, on the processing floor we had just crossed, someone called my name. "Mason." I turned automatically. At the far end of the line, I saw Tariq standing by the cutters, one hand raised. Except that Tariq was next to me, I froze. And the Tariq at my side said, "What?" Then from directly behind me, in my own voice, inches from my ear, "Don't turn around." Every instinct in me seized at once. My rule sheet crackled in my pocket as if something damp had touched it. Hargrove swore under his breath. Elena grabbed the cold storage handle without looking back and pulled the door open. Air like a morgue hit us in the face. We went in together because by then mistrust had become our common language and fear had become the only thing still translating. Cold storage was where the plant pretended to be honest. Everything there was overtly hostile. The temperature, the maze-like rows of metal shelving, the crunch of frost under boots, the way your breath thickened immediately in front of your face and made every shape unreliable. And if the processing floor used noise and routine to camouflage itself, storage used severity. It said plainly, "You could die here without anything supernatural happening at all." Maybe that was why it was the first place we could talk without pretending we still believed in ordinary explanations. The vestibule door swung shut behind us with hydraulic finality. Inside, white industrial bulbs glared over stacked crates and sealed freezers. The thermometer on the wall read 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Somewhere deeper in the room, compressors droned with the steady mechanical labor of keeping rot at bay. Tariq rubbed his arms and forced a grin. See? My rules were right. Safe zone. Nothing here is safe, Elena said. Hargrove moved between aisles, checking corners not for inventory but for absence, as though he expected something missing to be the real threat. I stayed near the door, staring at the wired glass. Beyond it, the processing floor was a wash of movement, indistinct through fogging frost. "Why'd you come back?" I asked him. Hargrove didn't answer at first. He pulled a crate half an inch off its stack, confirmed whatever he needed to confirm, and slid it back. "My wife had treatments insurance wouldn't cover," he said at last. "Plant called, said they paid return bonuses. And that was enough? For men like me?" He gave a humorless smile. "It usually is." "That's not what I meant." He stopped moving. "I know." Elena had taken her folded handwritten sheet back out. She studied it as if maybe the pressure of her gaze would force additional lines to surface. You said earlier we shouldn't follow each other's rules because they don't want us to agree. Who are they?" Hargrove looked at the floor between the freezer units. "I don't know what to call it," he said. "When I worked here before, people disappeared. Not often enough to make news. Just enough to make stories. A drifter on nights. A temp nobody could reach after the shift. One woman from intake whose locker got cleaned out before noon as she'd never existed." He breathed through his nose. Management always had explanations, Coast Guard sightings, drug problems, family emergencies, but now and then somebody would make it to dawn wrong. "Wrong how?" I asked. His eyes lifted to mine. "Like they'd passed a test they didn't know they were taking." Tariq snorted softly. "That's dramatic." Hargrove rounded on him. "Don't you think I'm performing?" Tariq spread his hands. "I think you've built mythology around a miserable job because the alternative is admitting you kept coming back to it." The words landed harder because there was truth in them. Hargrove's face darkened, but when he spoke again, the anger had gone inward. "The rules aren't protections," he said, "and not exactly. They're instructions, personalized. It gives each person a path. Different responses, different bait, same purpose." "For what?" Elena asked. His answer came without hesitation this time. "Sorting." The compressors hummed. Frost ticked lightly from a vent. That word should not have changed the room, it did. Sorting implied categories, criteria, selection. Something is being assessed rather than simply attacked. It took everything we had experienced, the conflicting rules, and the tailored voices, the different phenomena, and organized them around intention. Tariq laughed again, but I heard a strain in it now. "Sorting what? Personality types?" Hargrove looked at him with open pity. "Maybe." "No," Elena said quietly. We all turned to her. She was staring not at us, but at the rows around us, at the distances between shelves, the way the aisles formed narrow choices. "It's not trying to kill us," she said. Hargrove's jaw tightened. "Don't make that mistake." "I'm not," she tucked her page away. "I'm saying killing us isn't the goal. If it wanted bodies, it could flood a room, lock a door, turn off the heat. Instead, it gives us contradictory information and waits to see which patterns we follow." "You're making it sound like a lab," Tariq said. It feels like one." That lodged in me because it matched what had been wrong from the start. Not random danger, responsive danger, curious danger, something studying boundary conditions. What would he do if told not to look? What would he do if someone else were told to look? What would she do if the dead moved? What would he do if safety and separation became the same instruction? "Together we confuse it," Elena said. "Or give it 4 variables at once," Hargrove replied. She shook her head. No. Alone it understands us. Together it has to account for interference. Tariq shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and began pacing the narrow aisle. Great. So the strategy is what? Hold hands until sunrise? No, Hargrove said. The strategy is to stop assuming a group is protection. As if to punctuate him, and the lights dimmed for half a second and came back with a low electrical buzz. Somewhere outside storage, a speaker clicked on, then off, then on again. A voice came through, faint through the insulated door. Tariq, he stopped pacing. The voice was female, warm, not Mrs. Vale. Tariq, over here. His expression shifted so subtly I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for every wrong thing by then. Surprise first, then disbelief, then a softening I recognized with sudden shame. Hope. Who is that? I asked. He didn't answer. Tariq, Alina said sharply. He swallowed. That sounded like my sister. Nobody moved. She's dead, he added almost defensively as if we had accused him of lying. The voice came again from beyond the door. I know you can hear me. Hargrove stepped between Tariq and the vestibule. No? Tariq's face changed completely then. Not possessed, not blank, angry, cornered. You don't get to tell me no. I get to tell you you're being steered. By what? Something that knows grief when it sees it. That hit harder than it should have. Maybe because each of us reacted to it, visibly or not. My brother in the surf. Elena had a letter in unknown handwriting. Hargrove is taking a return bonus from a place he feared. Tariq, listening to a dead sister use his name like an apology. The door speaker clicked a third time. This time the voice said, cold storage is safe. Tariq smiled slowly. That's my rule, he said. No, I said. Your rule says stay there if something follows you. Maybe something is. He shoved past Hargrove before any of us were fully ready for it. The older man grabbed at his sleeve and missed. Tariq hit the vestibule door, yanked it open and vanished into the fogged transition space beyond. Hargrove lunged after him. I grabbed Hargrove's jacket instinctively. Wait! He tore free. Let go! Alina caught my wrist. Mason! What? Don't let him pull you into his rules. Hargrove looked between us with naked disgust. You think I'm going after him because of his rules? Aren't you? She asked. His face did something then. Some private collapse I only half understood. I lost somebody here before, he said. I'm not doing that again. The door to the vestibule swung slowly on its hinges. Cold vapor curled through the gap. We had seconds, maybe less. Go, Alina said to him. Hargrove hesitated only once. Then he slipped through the opening after Tariq, and the door began to close behind him, and the latch caught with a hollow metallic click. That left two of us. I looked at Alina. She looked back without flinching. We were not allies, not exactly. We were two people who had just watched the group break along the fault lines the building had been mapping all night. What now? I asked. Her answer came fast, as if she had already chosen before I spoke. We move, she said. Not where it wants. Not where they went. Where then? She glanced downward toward the floor beneath the rime of frost and steel. Anywhere but where it can sort us cleanly. I should have stayed put. I should have chosen rules over impulse for once in my life. But guilt makes companions of strange people, and fear had a way of making Alina seem like the only other person in the building still resisting categorization. And so when she headed deeper into the plant instead of toward the exit, I followed her. Behind us, inside the white machinery of cold storage, something knocked once from below. Not on the door. Under the floor. We left cold storage through a maintenance corridor I never would have found on my own. Elena knew where to look for unlabeled doors, for handles painted the same color as walls, for the little practical lies buildings tell about their own shapes. She moved fast, but not carelessly, pausing at each junction to listen with her head tilted, as if sound had become more trustworthy to her than sight. I stayed close enough to hear her breathing. The corridor behind storage was narrower than the public routes, with exposed pipes overhead, sweating condensation, and concrete underfoot instead of sealed factory flooring. And the air there was warmer but somehow less inhabited. No machine noise, no radio crackle, no clatter of the line. Just the distant sea working under everything, a pressure more than a sound. "You've been here before," I said quietly. "No. You move as you have." "My sister was missing for 19 days before they found her car," Elena said without looking back. "You get good at service corridors when institutions stop helping." The words hit with a clean, private force. "The note," I said. "You think it was about her?" "I think whoever sent it knew her case number before I did." That was the first real thing she had told me about herself, and it made everything around us feel more intimate and less safe. We passed a series of metal doors without windows. Some had stenciled labels: brine pump room, packaging supply, generator access. One bore no label at all, only a rectangle of newer paint where something had been covered over. I tried the handle as we went by. Locked. "Don't," Elena said. "What?" She did not stop walking. "You're still acting like curiosity is neutral." Maybe I was. Maybe that was my category. The corridor emptied us back onto an elevated section of catwalk above the processing floor. The difference was immediate and wrong. The plant below us should have been deafening. Instead, it was hushed, as though all the machinery were running at a distance we couldn't accurately judge. Conveyor belts moved in silence. Hanging strip curtains stirred without airflow. Pools of water on the floor reflected light that didn't seem to originate anywhere overhead. "Where is everyone?" I whispered. "Still here," Elena said. "And what does that mean?" She stopped and looked over the rail. I followed her gaze. The processing floor was active, but not with people in any way that I could accept quickly. Figures moved from station to station at the edge of recognition, always with backs turned, always half obscured by steam, plastic curtains, machinery housings. Workers if you only glanced, but nobody stumbled, nobody gestured, nobody performed the wasteful, incidental movements human bodies make when they are occupied rather than observed. They flowed. One of them reached the end of a conveyor and turned its head up toward us. It had no face I could make out, just the suggestion of wetness where a face should have been. I lowered my eyes so fast my neck spasmed. Rule 4. If you see someone where they should not be, lower your eyes first. The words from my page slid back into place in my head, no longer strange print but practical instruction. Elena noticed. "What was that?" "A new rule." "Tell me." I hesitated too long. Her expression hardened. "You don't trust me." "That's not..." "It is." I wanted to protest, but the truth had become embarrassing in ways that made denial pointless. I did not trust her completely. I trusted her more than I trusted Tariq's jokes, or Hargrove's omissions, or Mrs. Vale's dead administrative voice. But trust is not a binary in places designed to punish it. It frays by gradients. "I don't know what sharing changes," I said. "That's convenient." "You told me not to let other people pull me into their rules." "That wasn't the same thing." From somewhere below us, soft as breath through reeds, a voice called her name. "Elena." She went rigid. The voice did not echo. It seemed to rise from several places at once: the processing line, the far loading gate, the dark beneath the catwalk grating. Gentle, almost tender. "Elena, wait." I saw her throat move. "That's not my rule," she said. It was such a strange response that for a second I didn't understand it. Then I did. The voice was new. Not one of the expected tests she had been prepared for. That made it worse. "It knows your name," I said. "It knew my address." The voice came again, closer now, and this time it sounded almost exactly like a woman in her 20s trying not to cry. "Lena?" Elena shut her eyes so hard the muscles jumped. "No." "You hear that too?" I asked. She laughed once under her breath, small and ruined. "Unfortunately." Then the voice changed. "Mason," it said. Not from behind, and not ahead, beside us. I turned before I meant to. Standing 3 yards down the catwalk, just past a junction I would have sworn had been empty a second earlier, was me. Or a version close enough that the differences became visible only after the recognition had already struck. Same jacket, same badge, same damp hair curling at the temples, same one shoulder slightly higher than the other from an old sports injury. But the posture was easier, looser. The kind of relaxed I had not been in years. It looked like me with the burden edited out. "Mason?" Elena whispered. "I'm right here," I said. The other me smiled softly. That was the moment from the cold open, but memory slows the closer it gets to impact. There was still time then, just not enough. The duplicate lifted a hand toward Elena, palm open. Behind me, from the exact place I occupied, I heard my own voice say, "Don't move." Every nerve in my body lit up. Rule 6 hammered through me. Do not approach duplicates, even if they seem injured. But it wasn't injured. It was persuasive. That felt more dangerous. Elena looked from it to me and back again. "Which one?" Neither of us answered fast enough, because the catwalk behind the duplicate lengthened. I don't know how else to say it. The space expanded by a few impossible feet, enough to make distance uncertain. The railing seemed to bow outward. The floor beneath us vibrated with a deep, delighted hum. The thing wearing my face took one step closer to her. I stayed where I was because every rule in my pocket and every animal warning in my spine agreed on stillness. That was when trust finished becoming a weapon, not because she trusted the wrong one, because she had to trust somebody. I have replayed that minute so often that the memory has worn grooves in me. There are versions where I move sooner. Versions where I grab Elena's wrist and drag her backward. Versions where I shout that the thing in front of her isn't me, that I'm the real one, that she should close her eyes, hold her breath, jump the rail, do anything but reach. In those versions, maybe we both die. Maybe only I do. Maybe the plant gets bored and chooses another method. Memory is generous with alternatives because alternatives ask nothing of the person who made the original choice. What happened was simpler and uglier. Elena stood between two claims on reality and looked at me for help. The copy wore my face with unnerving precision now. The first wrongness, the smile dragged too wide, had gone. It had learned restraint. It knew enough by then to be convincing. "Mason," she said. Its voice answered in perfect overlap with mine. "I'm here." That was deliberate. I knew it even then. It was not mimicking for amusement. It was a collapsing distinction. If two things speak as one, the burden of choice moves to the witness. It wanted that burden on her, on me. My hand brushed the paper in my pocket. Do not engage. Do not approach duplicates. If a copy reaches for someone else, remain still. Those lines had not been written to save anyone. I understand that now. They had been written to identify what I would do when the cost of survival had a face. Elena's breath came shallow and white in the cold air above the line. Say something only you would know." The duplicate smiled faintly as if pleased by the request. I could have answered. 100 things came to mind, the way I broke my eyebrow at 12. My brother's name. The color of my mother's kitchen curtains was the year before she died. But every example felt absurdly small beside the scale of the room's wrongness. Facts belong to ordinary situations. The plant was operating on preference, fear, and reflex. It didn't need my biography. It needed my decision. The thing reached out its hand. Not quickly, not like a snatch, like an invitation. "Elena," it said in my voice, soft with concern. "Come on." She turned to me again. I saw then with terrible clarity that she was not asking who was real in any philosophical sense. She was asking which of us would risk ourselves for her. People mistake recognition for proof of identity all the time. What we really trust are patterns of care. If I shouted, I might break whatever concealment the rules still gave me. After the dock, after the voices, after the moving line, I had become horribly aware that visibility here was not about sight alone. The things under the water had noticed me when I noticed them. The duplicate noticed weakness when it was offered. The plant seemed to reward disclosure with attention. And attention was fatal. That was the calculation. Strip away every noble word and there it is. I believed intervention would move me from observed subject to selected target, and I wanted not to be selected. So I stayed silent, her fingers lifted toward the offered hand. I opened my mouth a fraction too late. "Elena." But by then it wasn't warning. It was grief. She touched it. Nothing exploded. No monster lunged. No dramatic violence rewarded the buildup. Horror rarely grants that release. Instead, the duplicate's fingers closed around hers with the tenderness of a lover helping someone over ice. Then its smile widened again, not all at once but in increments, each one small enough to force recognition by accumulation. The catwalk lights dimmed. The floor beneath the grating gave a long, low shudder like machinery starting up in another room. Elena inhaled sharply as a sudden cold had reached through her glove into the bones of her hand. Her eyes went to mine one last time. There was confusion there, then dawning understanding, and finally something I have never stopped trying to name because betrayal feels both too harsh and not nearly harsh enough. The duplicate stepped backward. In she moved with it, not dragged, guided. The impossible extra length in the catwalk opened again, folding space into a corridor that had not existed seconds earlier. Darkness pooled around its edges. I glimpsed far below or far beyond rows of suspended hooks turning slowly over black water. The lower deck, some part of me thought. Sorting. "Elena," I said, but now I was saying it to absolve myself, and she knew it. The duplicate looked at me over her shoulder with my own eyes and an expression I recognized with nauseating certainty. Pity. Then they were gone. No footfalls receding, no slam of a door, no scream. The corridor of wrong distance folded shut. The catwalk was its old length again. Only the hum under the floor remained, then even that dwindled into the ordinary clatter of machinery returning from far away. I stood alone. I don't know how long. Long enough for the processing line below to restart with a metallic jerk. Long enough for my knees to unlock. Long enough for me to realize I was still breathing in quick little sips like someone trying not to be heard. At my feet lay something small and pale, one of Elena's gloves. I picked it up before I thought better of it. The fleece lining was still warm. Inside the cuff, folded so neatly it might have been placed there for me, was her handwritten rule sheet. The ink had changed. Where her original 3 lines had been, there were now 6. The old ones remained, beneath them written in the same hard hand. Rule 4. If the corridor extends, do not let them lead with kindness. Rule 5. Witnesses are also selections. Rule 6. If someone you trust refuses to save you, do not forgive them. I dropped the paper as if it had burned me. The line below carried fish beneath white lamps, and for one impossible second, everybody on the conveyor rolled its eye toward me at once. I backed away from the rail. A sound drifted up through the grating from somewhere below the floorboards and pipes and concrete. Not a voice, not exactly, but a cluster of syllables practiced until they almost became one. My name, and Caleb's. The plant had learned enough about me to know the old wound under the newer ones. Maybe it had always known. Maybe that was why the water had looked up so quickly. I pressed both hands over my ears and stumbled down the catwalk until I found a stairwell that led to a service corridor and then another and then finally the main hall near the processing floor entrance. I don't remember choosing those turns. My body made them before thought caught up. By the time I reached the corridor, the plant was louder again. Normal loud, shift change loud, spray hoses, motors, the slam of bins, the grunt of labor. The performance of the industry resumed with insulting completeness as if nothing essential had happened. I bent over with my hands on my thighs and tried not to throw up. The rule sheet in my pocket crackled. When I took it out, more text had appeared under my own list. Rule 7. Survival may resemble complicity. Rule 8. If you return alone, do not ask where the others went. Rule 9. Finish the shift. I stared at the last line until the letters blurred. That was the true moral choice, I think. Not whether to save Alina, though that was the unforgivable one. It was what came after, and whether I would treat what I had done as the end of my humanity or simply another condition of getting through the night. I put the paper back in my pocket and kept walking. That was my answer. The main corridor looked cleaner than it had all night. Not spotless, nothing in a fish plant ever was, but restored to the plausible filth of honest labor. The puddles were where puddles should be. The fluorescent tubes buzzed at predictable intervals. The bulletin board near the clock-in station still held the same curled notices about hand injuries and sanitation compliance. Even the smell had flattened into something recognizable. Salt, bleach, machine oil. It was the kind of normal that feels staged once you've seen beneath it. I turned the corner toward the processing floor entrance and found Tariq standing under the exit sign. He was alone. My first reaction was relief so strong it made me hate myself a little more. Relief meant I still wanted a witness even after I had failed somebody who had counted on me to be one. My second reaction erased the first. He was dripping, not sweat, not thawing frost, water. Thin streams ran from his hairline down the sides of his face and off the cuffs of his sleeves. His work jacket clung darker in patches, as if he had been lowered into the harbor and hauled back up. There was no trail on the floor beneath him. The water seemed to vanish as soon as it fell. "Tariq," I said. He smiled. "Hargrove didn't follow the rules," he said. The sentence sat between us with the wrong emotional weight. Not grief, not shocked. Mild observation, like commenting on a late delivery. "Which rules?" I asked before I remembered Rule 8. He tilted his head. "Mine." That was when I noticed he hadn't blinked since I saw him. People talk about noticing missing behaviors as if it happens all at once, dramatically. It doesn't. First, something feels wrong. Then your brain runs down a list of explanations while trying not to name the most obvious one. Dry eyes, contact lenses, attention, fatigue. Then the seconds accumulate, and with them the certainty that some small automatic part of personhood has gone missing. "Tariq," I said again, softer this time. He took one step toward me. My hand went into my pocket and closed around my rule sheet so hard the paper crumpled. "Do not engage." That line had saved no one, but maybe it could still save me. "I looked for you," Tariq said. "You weren't where you were supposed to be." I did not answer. His smile faded a degree, not into anger but consideration. It was as if he were adjusting strategy in real time. "They're almost done," he said. Almost done with what? Sorting? Learning? Replacing? I wanted desperately to ask. Questions or hooks, though, and by then I could feel the barbs in every conversational opening. Water ran down the bridge of his nose. He didn't wipe it away. "Where's Alina?" he asked. Rule 8 throbbed in my pocket. "If you return alone, do not ask where the others went." It said nothing about being asked. That omission felt intentional. Everything omitted there was. Tariq's pupils looked too large under the corridor light. "She left," I said, and heard immediately that the sentence was truer in structure than content. She had left me. I had let her. He studied my face with an intensity that felt less like inspection than comparison. Then very gently he said, "Ion, you did what your rules wanted." I don't know if it was really him in that moment or the plant wearing his tone the way it had worn my face. Maybe that distinction no longer mattered. What mattered was the precision of the wound. Whatever stood there knew exactly where to press. Another step. Behind him, the processing floor gate stood partly open. Through the gap, I could see the line moving. Fish slid past under white light, silver and pink and dull black. One of them turned its eye toward the corridor. Blink. I stopped breathing automatically. Tariq smiled again, approving almost. That was the only reason I survived the next few seconds. Reflex borrowed from someone else's rules. Elena's, not mine. A lesson taken from a woman I had abandoned. The corridor speakers crackled overhead. "Badge 17, said Mrs. Vale's voice. "A report to dock intake." Tariq did not react. That was wrong enough to matter. Early he had responded to every voice, every call, every hook baited with familiarity. Now the official instructions slid past him like rain over glass, which meant either he was beyond being sorted by sound or he no longer belonged to the category that listened.